Good morning. This is a commissioner's information meeting with the Air Pollution Control Division of the Colorado Department of Health and the Environment. We have Mr. Josh Korth with us. Hello again, sir. Uh, and you're going to be reviewing the voluntary clean energy plan of Guzman Energy. So I think we got about 30 minutes with you, Mr. Korth. So unless Commissioner Gilman or Commissioner Plan have anything to say, which they shaking their heads no, I turn it over to you and Ms. Rosen. Ms. Rosen, can you share Mr. Korth's screen, or can he do it?
Yep, he should be able to.
Yep,
There you go.
there we go. All right.
Yeah, confirming that you can see my screen and that you can hear me.
We can see the screen and we can hear you. Take us away, Mr. Korth.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure to be here having a conversation with you all again. It's been a couple of months since our last conversation, and wanted to give you all an update on the next voluntary clean energy plan verification that we're in the process of wrapping up, and use this to fulfill. Oops. Sorry, got an auto logout message on my other screen. So use this to fulfill the consultation obligation as part of the Clean Energy Plan verification process. So similar agenda as we've gone through before. I'll go through the first couple of bullet points pretty quickly since you all have heard it before, but do want to cover it for anybody that may be listening in today that hasn't heard previous conversations. Then we'll move into some of the specifics about Guzman Energy and their plan. We'll talk about the verification that we have proposed and the process to wrap that up. We'll really talk a little bit more today about ongoing review. I think that is a critical component, and even more critical component now than it was the last time we had a conversation with you all. And then we'll leave some time at the end for questions and discussion on this plan or anything else that we cover today. So just a quick background on the statutory history. We started this process 6 years ago now with enabling legislation to look at really transitioning the energy sector within Colorado and changing the focus from percentage of renewable energy to truly a carbon accounting framework. And so the basis for that was created in 2019. In 2021, there was some updates to the legislation that created some of the ongoing tracking requirements that we'll talk about later today, and also updated some of the requirements for voluntary filing of CEPs and what the division and the Air Commission would need to do if plans were not filed or if utilities were off track with their plans. And then in 2023, there was direction for more transparency in the process, which led to the requirement for us to publish the draft reports, to hold a public meeting prior to finalization. That was really a kind of a key component of that. And then it expanded the utilities required to file a voluntary plan or potentially face regulation at the Air Quality Control Commission. And notably, one of those expansions was wholesale electric cooperatives or wholesale electric providers, like we're talking about today with Guzman Energy. So our process is intended to be neutral, objective, transparent verification of the data. We utilize the data that is collected and submitted by the utilities that comes out of their resource planning processes. We use the same standard data forms for all submissions, whether those are proceedings before you all at the Public Utilities Commission or whether they are voluntary plans that are submitted. And through our process, we tried to resolve or verify and confirm interpretation of things that were undefined or inconsistent in the statutes. Notably, we have both CO2 and GHG emissions for the differences between the statutes. We look at both Colorado total sales and Colorado retail sales, depending on the type of utility. We defined how REC retirement was handled for those utilities, and that's all part of our guidance document and the instructions in our workbook. So we use a single published workbook and guidance for all the filings that come before you all, as well as the voluntary CEP verifications. They have defined input data sets. They have defined pick list selections. Emission factors and conversion constants are in the workbooks. And then probably most importantly, the equations are pre-populated so that everybody's basically doing the math the same way. I mentioned on the prior slide, we calculate CO2 and total GHGs for the differences in the statutory requirements. And then we calculate the reductions on Colorado sales and Colorado retail sales. So our process is intended to confirm that the statutory thresholds have been calculated properly and the data was entered appropriately. We verify that input data from the information that is provided by the utility from their resource modeling processes and approaches. And we look at both the 2005 baseline and the 2030 projections. We hold a public meeting. In this case, the public meeting for Guzman Energy was on June 11th. And we hold a PUC consultation briefing with you all prior to finalizing any plans. We put the draft report out for public comment on May 19th. The public comment period is closing at the end of today, and then we will submit the final verification report into the informational docket as part of the overall verification record. So transitioning a little bit to discussing Guzman Energy. So Guzman Energy is a Colorado wholesale electric utility. They were formed a little over a decade ago. And notably, this plan is a little bit different than some of the ones you all have seen before and we've discussed before, in that it is a combined plan. Guzman Energy submitted the combined CEP on behalf of 6 of their Colorado customers. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next couple of slides. The legislation or the statutes allow for a combined CEP to be filed. And in this case, there are a number of Colorado small cooperatives who are above the statutory thresholds for filing a voluntary plan, but either have not or will not file a plan because they're part of this combined plan. Guzman Energy plan does not include anything related to Holy Cross Energy. They have their own CEP that has been previously verified. It also does not include anything for United Power. They are planning to file their individual plan within the 2-year time period from when their trigger point is with their leaving of their current provider or their previous provider. Guzman Energy utilized data from its current as well as its anticipated contracts over the next 5 years. This includes both fossil and renewable resources, and their plan covers the supply to their Colorado customers covered by their plan. As I mentioned, Holy Cross and United Power are not part of their 2030 plan. They were not customers of Guzman Energy in 2005, obviously, if Guzman did not exist as a company. And so there is no information in this plan related to either of those utilities. So the Guzman Energy combined plan covers the 6 utilities that you see listed here. Some of them are already Guzman customers. Some of them will become Guzman customers in the next couple of years. And we'll talk about that on an upcoming slide related to the interim year tracking. And so the progress with the interim year targets as well as the 2030 goals will be tracked on an aggregated process. So Guzman's supply and the supply of these utilities in aggregate associated with the interim year targets and the 2030 goals. So we published the draft verification report, as I mentioned, back on May 19th. We have calculated an 86% reduction in GHG emissions from the 2005 baseline levels. Those 2005 baseline levels basically come from other plans that have already been filed and those customers leaving those other utilities and becoming Guzman Energy customers. And so we did take time to make sure that the 2005 baseline was consistent with those other plans and what was reported and verified in those other plans, and any subsequent plans that are filed by those companies, those emissions will be deducted from those other companies' 2005 baseline levels. We provided the supporting data used to populate the workbook as a supplemental file when we published the draft report. And then with the submission of their voluntary plan, Guzman Energy is committing to Colorado, to be part of that pathway that leads to the energy transition that we're looking for. Colorado is still on track from our calculations to achieve at least an 80% reduction statewide in greenhouse gas emissions. And this plan really fills kind of a gap in some of the data that we had previously with customers that were part of other utilities but are leaving those utilities and doing a different energy provider in the future. And so we do believe that this plan and this process is consistent with what we need to see as a state in order to stay on track with our 2030 goals. So this is just a quick screen grab of what's in the draft verification workbook, just so that people can see what that data looks like. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the ongoing review piece. Reg 22 has established annual reporting requirements for the utility emissions and supplemental data. After submission of voluntary plans, we have an obligation to review that annual data and report back to the AQCC on progress. If a utility is off track with their interim year goals for 2 consecutive years, then there is an obligation for us to report that to the commission to consider taking action to get that utility back on track through essentially a rulemaking that would obligate the utility to update their clean energy plan and both get back on track with the 2030 goal, as well as make up any cumulative reductions that have been missed in the process. And then really, I think for today's conversation, what I want to focus on is this 2027 statutory obligation to create a report about all of the utilities in Colorado and whether they're on track to achieve the 80% emissions reductions. Just earlier today, in fact, EPA has published a proposed rulemaking to roll back utility GHG regulations nationally. We're tracking funding changes through Congress, and particularly IRA, IIJA, New Era funding, potential changes to investment or production tax credits. There are a lot of things going on that are going to impact the financial side of these decisions. We've seen a number of very significant court rulings over the last 12 months or so. We anticipate there's going to be a number of other additional major cases brought before district and Supreme Court over the next 12 to 18 months that are going to have significant implications on how utilities and other fossil fuel industries do future planning. We're seeing significant changes at EPA, at Department of Energy, Department of Interior in their policies towards renewables, towards permitting, towards siting of resources. And so we're very actively trying to watch all the things going on there, changes to NEPA and how, transmission, how substations, how, resources get built and permitted, I think is going to be very, very carefully need to be watched over these next couple of years. We keep hearing in the news about tariffs, and the ones that I am particularly interested in as it relates to the electric sector are tariffs on steel as well as imported transformers. There's a tremendous amount of uncertainty that is out there right now. And so, we are very seriously and very intentionally watching what is going on with an eye towards what does this mean for the report that we need to produce in about 18 months or so that reports out on, will Colorado have the resources it needs to meet that statutory reduction that we're targeting? And then finally, as you all are aware, there is market development that is going on with SPP, with the day ahead market. And so we're watching that and, participating with your staff in some of those conversations, making sure that keeps things aligned for the goals that Colorado has in the future. And so really wanted to highlight, this report and this obligation that we have through statute to report back, not only on where do we think we'll be in 2030, but do we really have a real pathway to get there? And so that's, I think, one thing I wanted to leave you all with today is that, we are continuing to watch those things very closely. We're, thinking very intentionally about what that report looks like, and really do envision a lot of future collaboration with your staff as we move through these next couple of years. I mentioned the interim targets earlier and how there are a number of new customers joining Guzman Energy between now and 2030. If you look at the numbers from 26, 27, 28, you'll see a very significant dip from 26 to 27 and a almost as significant increase from 27 to 28. This is really a result of the customers that are joining Guzman Energy in that 2028 timeframe. Roughly their energy supply doubles in that 1 year with the customers that are joining them. And so that's why you see that big jump in attributable GHG emissions to the combined plan that we're talking about today. So in summary, we're proposing to verify that the clean energy plan of Guzman Energy will reduce emissions by at least 80% by 2030, using our consistent guidance and published process. We have an obligation, as I mentioned earlier, to ensure that these emissions reductions are realized through the annual reporting and review of that data, reporting back out to our commission if utilities are off track. And then we are obligated to use additional measures, including, as I mentioned, up to that potential of AQCC rulemaking that would require an updated CEP to ensure that these reductions are actually achieved, not just in 2030, but in the interim years as well. So with that, I will end the slide deck and open it up to any questions or discussion that you all may want to have.
Thank you, Mr. Korth. As always, we appreciate you. Just a quick question for you. When we were working in the markets environment with Markets Plus and SPP, RTO West, the utilities agreed, and I think SPP agreed to allocate emissions based on for thermal generation based on the capacity credit the resource was claiming. Does this emissions allocation track that approach where all the underlying emissions are tracked back to the resource claiming the capacity credit?
Yes, I believe that it does. We've had conversations with Guzman as well as the other utilities, and it is our understanding that when we get out to 2030 and even before, Guzman is coordinating directly with the utilities that own those resources. And so, we don't have this, I don't know if shell game is the right way, but where it goes from one utility to another utility to a third utility to a final sale. It is our understanding that the capacity and the energy scheduling is currently being done directly between Guzman Energy and the owners of those fossil companies. And so, yes, I do believe that capacity is factored into any market offerings that would be made on behalf of those resources.
And are you guys verifying that, or you're just sharing the representations of the underlying utilities in Guzman, and I guess it's left to SPP to verify it's consistent and the balancing authorities that it's consistent with the methodology?
And so today we are not verifying that. We do intend to verify that when the utilities join the markets. and be able to ensure that, in the case where a utility has offered capacity and the market has not picked it up, but for coal resources in particular, you can't start and stop those every day. And so if the market were to not pick it up, but the resource was still operated, those emissions have to be attributed to one of the Colorado utilities that has either ownership or energy stake in that resource.
All right. Commissioner Gilman, questions, comments, anywhere you'd like to go?
Yeah, well, thank you as usual, Mr. Korth, for bringing this information to us and completing this analysis. Really, I think in coordination with our group to help us fulfill our regulatory duties in total here. One question, a lot of the folks you listed and even those you don't list, a lot of the movement of them to Guzman was kind of defection from long-term power supply agreements from others. And so I just don't know, and you don't need to say if it's confidential or something, but how long are these utilities obligated to Guzman in terms of like how durable is this situation that these are the exact utilities that Guzman is serving? Or is this like a more fluid situation that we need to kind of keep better tabs on?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that question. So our clean energy plan process currently goes through 2030. And so our window of visibility, I guess is a good way to call it, is essentially through that 2030 time period. There have been efforts over the last couple of years to potentially extend the clean energy planning process out further. And so if that were to happen through the legislative process, then we would then extend our window of visibility further. But, I do not know how long these contracts are for, if they're 5, 10, 20-year contracts. We did not verify that because they all extend beyond 2030. But in the instance where the clean energy planning process would go out to a future year, then we would start to look at, are these contracts still in place in whatever that future target year is? But, generally speaking, my understanding of these types of contracts, across the industry and nationally, they're typically 10 to 20 or even longer year contracts than that. But we do not have specifics on the individual expiration dates of the current contracts.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that insight. I appreciate it. That's my only question. Thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner Plant.
Thanks, and thanks again, Mr. Korth. Appreciate you giving this presentation. I had a quick question for you. I think it was slide 12 you were talking about. You showed a decrease between 26 and 27, and then an increase from 27 to 28. And I think you had indicated that 28 is when these utilities would be joining, and that's what's sort of driving that increase. But I was wondering, what is the decrease from the 26 to 27 decrease?
Yeah, real quickly, my other screen timed out, so give me just a second to get back to that. Apologies, I don't know why it timed out on me so quickly. So the change there, let me get down to the right page.
I think it was 12.
Yeah, it was on slide 12, and I'll pop that back up in a second. I was just getting to the supporting data that was part of the package that we put out for public comment. So from 26 to 27, the energy requirements essentially stay the same. And there is a very substantial increase in wind and slightly smaller increase in solar resources that come online in 2027 that Guzman is contracted with. And so you see a decrease in the need for coal and gas-fired generation in that year. Those resources essentially are coming online a year to 6 months before they're going to be needed for the next calendar year. And so you see a dip in that first year because of the resource mix change. And then you see an increase as the additional customers come on in that following year. And there are more fossil resources needed to support approximately doubling of the energy needs.
Okay, great. That makes sense. And then my only other question was, with regard to, you had mentioned, the EPA, potentially, I guess, I don't know, barring states from setting goals. I mean, is this one of those things? Is this a new assertion of that sort of authority, or is this is the ability to regulate state emissions? Is that something that is directed to states or not enumerated and so left to states, or what? I'm not sure what the legal sort of construct is there.
I appreciate that question, and it is a muddy mess right now, I will just say.
Is that a technical term?
Yes, exactly. 18 months ago or so, there was a proposal for a national GHG standard, essentially for both coal-fired utilities and gas-fired power plants as well. We felt like Colorado was already on track to both meet and exceed that federal standard, but we do think it has influence on our neighbors and on participants in markets. And so it may change the resources that are available in those markets. We've seen from Department of Energy a couple of emergency actions to prolong the life of coal units this summer because of reserve margin concerns or load growth concerns. And so while we don't think it has a direct impact on Colorado, we do think it impacts, what utilities across the nation and in our neighboring states are making decisions on for their resource mix. And as we look at organized markets, as we look at imported energy, which is part of our calculus, we do think it has the potential to have some impact there.
Okay, so not directly on our authority to set those standards, but they can maybe extend the life of plants that would otherwise be going out of service in other places that we might then get service from.
Yeah, I think it will be interesting to see, because the couple of that I'm aware of currently, I believe one was in Michigan and the other was in Ohio. Those units were part of an organized market, and
Right.
neither the utility nor the market made a request for the emergency declaration to keep the unit online, but Department of Energy preemptively did it, and then the utilities agreed to continue to operate those units at least through the summer months, because of the perceived reliability and resource adequacy concerns. And so
is that a FERC thing or a DOE thing?
I believe it came from DOE, but I would have to go back and verify.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting times right now.
It's a brave new world.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Korth. Thank you, Ms. Rosen. We appreciate you coming by, and look forward to seeing you in the coming weeks and months. So thanks all.
Sounds great. Pleasure to be here again, have these conversations with you all.
Likewise.